Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Nikyta. Nikyta Palmisani is going to be talking about closing the loop in the waste stream. Thank you, Nikyta.
Hi, I'm Nikyta Palmisani. I'm the Training, Education, and Outreach Coordinator for Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District. Right, so closing loop. So I want to just define some terms first for you all. And you may already be very familiar with these terms, but the first one is a circular economy. And so this idea of closing the loop, making a circle, right? So we have had for, unfortunately, a long time, this idea that we could create a product, it could live its life, and then it will end in the landfill. And that's a fairly new concept for a lot of places because previously materials were precious and important. If an object was going to be created, it was going to be passed down or handed down or reused in some way, or its materials recaptured. And a circular economy goes back to that kind of same idea. So an economic system that's aimed at eliminating waste and the continual use of resources. So circular systems employ reuse, sharing, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and recycling to create a closed loop system. And this minimizes the use of resource inputs and the creation of waste, pollution, and carbon emissions. So a circular economy aims to keep products, equipment, and infrastructure in use for longer, improving the productivity of these resources. So this will all be really important for my lecture tonight because I'm really going to be focusing on a lot of those words that you just heard around reuse, sharing, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and then you'll notice that recycling is at the end, and it's like that for a reason. So like I said, I'm from Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District, just in case there's anybody. Oh, hi, Clark, so good to see you. And Gretchen, so great to see you too. Just in case there's anybody in the audience tonight who's unfamiliar with what we do and who we are a community-run solid waste disposal district. And I just said hi to Clark, who is our retiring board chair. Clark, thank you so much for your awesome years of service. What that means is that even though we have oversight by the county, our amazing board has figured out how to run our own drop box facility. So we don't actually have a hole in the ground. We're not actually a dump. We're not even a transfer station like on Orcas or on San Juan where they dump garbage into a big tipping floor, scoop it up, and then take it off. We actually only have like 40-yard dumpsters that items go into, and those are taken off by truck. So we're considered a drop box facility. And the reason that's important is because we can do a lot of things with a lot more nimble agility than some of our other, even just larger islands do. And one of the things that we do that will be maybe important later is that we self-bale our recyclables. So if you look over at my photo on the left, you see bales, and bales are just densified, condensed materials put into a little cube that make it easier for shipping and more economical and more space efficient. You'll look at, this is Eric Hall over here on the left, and he is self-separating his recyclables, which is also really important because we have distinct spaces where all of our materials go, which if you're thinking about remaking something, it's really easy to remake something if you only have like all the aluminum in one place or all the #1 plastics or #2 plastics. It becomes really helpful and easy as opposed to sorting through a big single stream recycling source. So continuing on here, we have awesome volunteers. You'll see them in their vests. And our current recycling practices, as many of you are probably familiar with, do not close the loop yet, right? So a lot of the recyclables that you see that go into these bins get shipped off of the island. They go to a broker. The broker then brokers them to another space, and most traditionally, they were sent off in big shipping containers on freighters, on boats, and sent to Asia or different countries in Asia who dealt with their recycling. And it's a very non-closed loop system. There's a ton of emissions, a ton of carbon that is emitted in that process. So it's not a very efficient system. So let's move forward on that. So we also have we call it our Take It or Leave It, and it's a giant free store, right? So clean, reusable donations are donated by our community. You'll see more orange vests and awesome smiling faces, and those are our volunteers who are taking these boxes of everything, and we're going through them, making sure that there's not waste in them. We're diverting recycled materials into the recycle streams that are attached in our recycle plaza just up above. And we're also putting everything out for reuse, right? So we, again, have all these systemized piles, right, of things that can all be taken for free. And if you're a maker and you want to have all the textiles, you want to have all of the books, you do book arts, right? It's so easy because this is free organized resource. So we also have furniture, housewares, toys, tools, metals, sporting goods, garden wares. We have basically everything that could be donated and reused in some way. It's about a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot space that everything is shelved and housed into, and consumers are allowed to come and take things for free. So the whole operation is free thanks to our volunteers. So how this leads into the maker and the maker movement. Basically, anybody who makes anything is a maker. It's not new. It's not a new thing, right? You crochet, you make pickles, you brew beer, you grow a garden, you build a house, you build a ham radio. You're a maker. You make something, right? So makerism is not new. What is new is this is the current maker culture that I've put down there, and you can see the definition of, which is a subculture. And what I want to say about that is that it comes out of the DIY culture, which is the do-it-yourself culture. And it also comes out of, they say, hacker culture, which has a very large open source ethos to it. And those are really important because as you had traditional, what I'm going to call analog makerism, pickle making, crochet, woodworking, metalworking, right? Things were non-proprietary. It was easy to get repair manuals. It was easy for makers to exchange information about how they were doing things with other makers. Then you have this period in time when copyright was really important and patents were really important. So you had these proprietary informational systems that were hidden from the general populace because somebody was, you know, making their $1 million from their patents, right? And they didn't want to share that proprietary information with the public. That also happened with repair, right? So products got increasingly difficult to repair, and even repair manuals were not being shared with the public at large. And so you had to go to like an authorized repair person, and that created jobs, but it also created these barriers to everyday populations of people being able to make anything, being able to build a 3D printer or a drone or fill in the blank, right? So the reason I've included current maker culture is because as the internet came into being and came to the fore, it was built by a lot of people who believed in an open source ethic. They said, look, good ideas are everywhere. The more we collaborate and the more we share, the easier it is for us to build a better world. So current maker culture is really involved in that ethos and steeped in it. So makers love to share with each other, love to give each other ideas and plans and repair ideas. So a lot of that open source DIY ethic is really important in the maker movement. You can see down in this definition that the current maker movement has a lot of interest in electronics, robotics, 3D printing. There's also like biomakerism, where people are even doing like biological printing and all kinds of things in this very open source collaborative maker spirit. So that's going to be important too, that definition. So I am a maker, I'm an art maker, I'm a poet, and I am just a generally curious human being, and I believe that I can do it if I need to, right? Let me find the resources, because I also come out of this DIY culture that says, sure, yeah, you want to make a magazine? I don't need a corporate sponsor. I can make a zine, I can cut and paste, I can use a copy machine, right? So I've been involved in the maker movement probably the last 10 years or so. So that's me at Maker Faire, which is the photo on the left. It's me at Maker Faire in maybe 2012, I think. The Bay Area is the global flagship of Maker Fairs. They are not exclusive to the Bay Area. There are Maker Fairs all over the world. Seattle has one, Bell Bellingham has one. I think Everett has a maker fair. There's different what's considered regional maker fairs. And these are just places and spaces where makers get together to, again, share information, to show off what they've got, to sell their goods, to collaborate. So the one that happens in the Bay Area is quite large. It's in the San Mateo Convention Center. And I went from being a participant and saying, "Heck, this is so fun. I love makers. I love everything that's going on here," to being a presenter. And I think that was 2018. And the bulk of my lecture tonight will be about our Remake Lab and about what I'm calling a remakery. And so what I was presenting in the right-hand photo is the project that I'll be talking to you a lot about tonight, which was our Remake Lab, and then what that leads us into and how we could close the loop locally to taking a lot of these materials that are in these handy dandy piles in our Recycle Plaza and in our Free Store, and using a maker ethic to close the loop and make local products, repair things, share skills, tool lending library. Really, the sky is the limit if you think about these kinds of spaces. So continuing forward. All right, Dr. Joshua Pierce, one of my favorite people, love this guy. He had this great idea that he said, I would love to solve two major problems with one invention. I would love to see if I can help eliminate waste on beaches and ocean pollution. Of course, plastics have been washing up on beaches all over the world for a lot of years. It's such an epidemic problem. And he was a maker, and he said, what if I made this fill extruder, basically, that took beach plastics, shredded them. So you can see in this little green yellow kind of box, you would put this shredded plastic material. It'll run it through this extruder. It'll extrude it out like a piece of spaghetti. It'll wrap it over here in this wheel, and I'll turn it into 3D printer filament. And then I'll create 3D printers that come programmed to make more 3D printers. So he called those RepRaps, rapidly replicating 3D printers. So 3D printers who would print more 3D printers, and actually technically they only print the plastic parts of the 3D printer. So as you can see, like in this piece right here, all the yellow neon green are the metal parts that have been printed. It's got 3D printed, it looks like dial, but it's got a metal casing, it's got circuit boards, and it's got other pieces that aren't 3D printed. So it's RepRap it's close, but it's not quite all the way there. Anyway, I thought, here we are, a small island. We're very similar to his idea about bringing these to third world countries. Why don't we try this here, and let's see if we can do it. So introduce the team. These three women, and there's one more woman named Ashi who's not pictured in this photograph, but she will be in other ones, enter in the Remake Lab. So there were these incredibly brilliant young women who were in high school at the time. This was in 2016. And we said, let's try it. Let's see if we can do it. Thank goodness. Again, maker movement is very much about collaborative knowledge. The man pictured on the far left is Brad Buchanan, who's a phenomenal PhD scientist and plastics expert. The other man in the hat is David Zaplak. He is our facility manager at the dump, and also an airplane mechanic and a maker extraordinaire. So he was game. And we said, is it possible that we could just use stuff from the Take It or Leave It? We also had Paige Reed, who will be pictured also further on, who is another PhD engineer and one of the founding board members of our Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District. He is also a maker extraordinaire and a very curious human. And he said, let's try it. Let's grab anything that might shred plastics. So you can see we've got like blenders, and we're gonna get like an office printer, because that's what Dr. Joshua Pierce originally said, was like, you could take an office printer and like shred plastics with it. Turns out office shredders don't work, but we did our research. We tried it just for fun. Even when we cut them up really tiny and we cut off the tops and we cut off the bottoms and we tried the office shredder, it just wasn't robust enough to shred the plastics that we were working with. So there is Paige Reed, who I just mentioned, on the right, and there's Ashi Bartolucci on the left. She was the fourth of these incredible group of women, young women who were part of this project of trying to work what we called the Remake Lab. And our goal was to see if we could take plastics from our recycle plaza, shred them, and turn them into 3D printer filament. So Paige and Ashi helped build this whole contraption. You can see it's got a bright orange bicycle wheel. All this stuff was upcycled from either our recycle plaza or our take it or leave it. So that's a big wheel for a big fly so that it gets enough crank to try to be a hand crank to crank the plastics. This beautiful teak wood that Paige used from, I think, some of his leftover boating projects. Basically this tall silo is a place where the plastics, the actual plastics went into plastic bottles, and Paige always has safety in mind, so it's very tall so that a student couldn't possibly get their hand in there and get their hand into the shredder. So safety is always number one. There's a plexiglass shield in front of this flywheel as well, to make sure nobody's hands or scarves get caught in there. So we decided to have this hand crank for public interaction, so people could see actually how hard it is to shred a single water bottle. It turns out it's hard. So pictured behind it is a motor that was upcycled from, it was a chair lift from someone's house where to get up a flight of stairs, if a person was not able to climb the stairs, it would be like a little seat. So that motor was taken from that chairlift and then used, and Paige and Brad were really brilliant in that the thing that they started with our ladies was saying, whenever you're designing anything, let's start with the basics. Let's start with your power output. How much power output do we actually have available in our dump space, or what we call the dump, it's actually not a dump, in our recycle plaza, or even in our classroom spaces? We don't have the option to have 220. We got 110. 110 is what we're working with. Let's make sure that everything that we are designing, starting with our motor, works on 110. This is going to be really important when I talk about our friends on Orcus who didn't start with those important questions. So we did that. We have all this public interaction. You can see Ashi is fitting a bottle into the top, into that silo, and you can see Dan Post in the hat here, who's also one of our original founding board members and continues to still be a driver for LSWDD. We love Dan. He is demoing it there in the Recycle Plaza. The ladies did everything, and thanks to Brad and Paige, who are incredible educators, they helped make all of these maker skills accessible to our team of young women. So here is Brad teaching Miss Valit here how to solder and how to weld. So everybody got a chance welding and doing fabrication. We did an upcycled reuse and design. So we started with what do we have and what can we use? So we were looking at like, how do we possibly take items from our recycle plaza using that upcycled or, you know, remanufactured closed loop ethic and try to make this. We got our first 3D printer. This one is a monoprice printer, did a great job. I now have Perusa, which I found out at Maker Faire was, you know, sort of a big winner. So they've been coming up and getting better and better 3D printers. Word to the wise, they're still very futzy. You need to be a maker hobbyist, person who wants to have wrenches on their earrings or wants to really play with your 3D printer still. They're not plug and play like a 2D printer. They're still sort of mimeograph style, old, clunky, difficult. You need to spray things on their surfaces to get them to adhere, like glue stick, hairspray, insider. People who are 3D printer insiders, this is their reporting back in the last like 3 months. You know, I have people who are working with 3D printers who are like, get yourself some hairspray. So the idea that 3D printers are like, you know, plug and play and everybody can use them at home and just print designs and have them be effortless, we're not quite there yet. But the ladies were extremely cavalier, and this was the very first print we did, which was the Arc de Triomphe, because the ladies were in French Club and had gone to France. And so you can see Naomi Valit there holding the little tiny Arc de Triomphe because we shrunk it down to make the print less time. In the 9 months that we went from beginning our project to trying to make it happen, trying to create our own Philistruder, Brad did a little research and found out in that 9 months of time, a fill extruder kit came on the market and was cheaper to purchase than just the heating elements it would have taken for us to build our own extruder. We said, great, let's get the kit. Turns out the kit was also very labor intensive. You still had to be a hobbyist and you still had to have a lot of skills to get this done. So Paige Reed spent 13 hours making an extremely thorough step-by-step process for our ladies so that they could do all of the circuitry, all the mechanical build, and all of the assembly themselves, which was an awesome learning opportunity. So here you can see Nora Zaplak, and she's doing a lot of the circuitry there. There's Naomi, and she's doing some of the physical build, the mechanical build for it, getting the extruder in there. Brad and Paige being helpful in that time when we didn't have to wear masks and we could be in physical proximity. Remember that time? And there is Ashi Bartolucci. She was also a big part of our team, and she used this as her senior project. So you can see the fill extruder kit. It ended up looking like this. So the piece on the left is, there's actually a little funnel, and that's where the shredded plastics go into. You can see this long sort of dangling cord, not very visible, but kind of if you look close, and that's where the extruded filament comes out. It gets dried as it goes, and then it gets wound on the winder on the right. We thought it was a brilliant idea. We were so excited, so much R&D. We're going to take all of this waste plastic, we're going to turn it into this fodder and to be able to print and manufacture items locally. And then we did our first 3D print of #1 PET, and we were really excited about it. And then, of course, the challenges came. And they are numerous. And there's a reason that not everybody's doing this all the time. And the reasons are, well, sorry, let me get to the reasons. Here's also what happened during our process. So we started in 2016. In 2018, the National Sword of China, or now it's called the National Sword Policy, I believe, happened. Many of you are very familiar with that, where China said, America, we're stopping taking a lot of your garbage, and that means we're going to stop taking a lot of your plastics, which it turns out are too dirty to actually be recycled. So suddenly our remake lab ramped up, and we went from just an educational track to asking the question, could we have a business track? Could the remake lab divert waste plastics from our recycle plaza, thus answering the question of, can we actually do something with these things that have now become landfill or now become garbage because we have no broker for them? And could we actually turn them into some sort of sellable project? So we had a plastic solutions committee meeting that met for about a year, and we went over everything possible. Could we smush all the plastics into just a big plastic sludge and turn them into parking strips? Could they be Jersey barriers? Could they be park benches? Could they be fence posts, right? So we went through exhaustive ideas, and then not just the idea, but then doing the data and trying to figure out, is it feasible? Could we mix plastics? Would they have to be single plastics? Would they have to be single types of resin? And then we started looking at what were the infrastructure costs? And sadly, most of the infrastructure costs so outweighed, for instance, the ability to even buy a used large scale extruder that could shred and smush all of our plastics and turn them into what they call elephant goop or something. They call it it has elephant glop. It has some funny nickname in the industry of just basically kind of just a mixed plastic sludge. Could we turn it into something that was not going to be weight bearing or important, like a fence post, like a parking strip, something like that? And even there, the infrastructure costs for running such a machine were in the tens of thousands of dollars, which for the only we only had 3,000 to 10,000 pounds of these plastics didn't make sense on a business track kind of proposal. But let me tell you, the inquiry was exhaustive. A lot of really smart minds in the room really trying to make that solution work. So back to the remake lab, we had some challenges in our R&D, which it turns out everybody's had. So at the same time that Dr. Joshua Pierce was launching his brilliant idea about this recycle bot, Lots and lots of universities saw it, and just like me, thought, we're plucky, we're makers, we're going to give it a go. So University of Washington, Wazoo, Washington State, and also Western University, all of them, all their engineering clubs were trying to do the same thing I was trying to do. So I got in touch with them all and collaborated with University of Washington, also Wazoo in Pullman, and Western University. We were all trying to accomplish the same goal. We were all failing. We were all failing for similar reasons. It's hard. And it turns out plastic is tricky and complicated. It turns out that plastic molecules change depending on what interacts with them. So for instance, we were using water bottles because we thought, that's the least contaminated item that we could get in our recycle plaza. We could use these #1 PET water bottles, take off their labels and cut off their thick plastic, and maybe we could use that. Turns out, if a plastic bottle has been in the sun changes its molecular shape, right? So it photodegrades, which is why if you've ever left a plastic bin, for instance, or a tub out in the sun, it goes from being a malleable plastic to like breaking and sort of fracturing like glass. And that's because the plastic is literally photodegrading because of its interaction with light, with sunlight. Turns out that plastic water bottles also have what's called a void space. So the plastic molecules are big, but there's little spaces in between where little tiny molecules, like water, can hide out. So if you've had or housed water in a plastic bottle, the water actually gets absorbed, water molecules, little bits of them get absorbed into the plastic itself, and then therefore the secondary product changes in molecular shape. So this is what we were encountering when we were doing our shredding process. So we would shred the #1 PET water bottles and we would turn them into our 3D extruder, we would extrude them into 3D printer filament, but the filament wasn't behaving the way we needed it to. And it was, instead of being malleable like a plastic, it was breaking like a hard spaghetti noodle. And it's because the plastic was taking on this water molecule and it was becoming crystalline. It was becoming less bendable and more breakable, which for our final output, which was very specific, 3D printer filament needs to be very, very specific. It wasn't going to cut it for our output. So what we really needed was a dedicated space that was clean and dry, because it turns out that even 3D printer filament sitting in my office, which is fairly clean and dry, you would think, an office space that we have above Blossom Groceries, if you've ever been to Lopez Island, it turns out that we have enough ambient humidity in the Pacific Northwest that my 3D printer filament has been changing in molecular structure and getting more and more brittle because it is absorbing ambient water and changing its molecular shape, and therefore it changes the output of my 3D prints. They get sticky, they stick to each other, the filament breaks, right? So I have to store all of my filament in Ziploc bags with desiccant packs so that it's pulling all that ambient humidity out of the filament. So what we needed and we discovered is we needed more drying. And so when I was interacting with Western University in their plastics department, they have desiccant dryers. So when you start working with universities or industries who have enough investment capital and aren't at the hobbyist level, suddenly you have a lot more accessibility. So things have desiccant dryers, cooling baths, much easier time to process these plastics, right? I mean, this is not news. If you have a large enough infrastructure, you can do almost anything. But what we found out we needed was dedicated space, dry space, something that would help us dry the plastics. And we need a dedicated staff and support team because, as I said, even the 3D printers that come straight out of the box are futzy. They need a person who understands them. They need a person who's going to help fix them or repair them. Their nozzles get clogged and you have to take them apart and you have to get really intricate with little tools. So they need a dedicated staff. And unfortunately, our amazing team of volunteers, our awesome PhD scientists, Brad and Paige, they like to go away for the winter for months, you know. Remember that time when we used to be able to go away for months to warmer climates in January? Remember that time? So they would leave for 3 months at a time. So when my experts left, suddenly I'm like, he's on a boat. I can't email him anymore. So we realized we really needed a dedicated staff and team, and we needed storage and we needed working space. So those were some of the challenges to why the Remake Lab is not up and running. Doesn't mean I didn't present it everywhere, including the including the Maker Faire. So that photo that I showed you way back when at Maker Faire, when I was presenting our Remake Lab at Maker Faire, and it was such an exciting idea that I had standing room only crowds of people who were really interested in how they could do it in their place. And in fact, some gentlemen from the Pacific Science Center in Seattle were at my presentation and invited our Remake Lab to come and present at the Pacific Science Center. They'd love to create one there. So as soon as we work out the bugs, we will, of course, in an open source collaborative way, share it out. But we haven't worked out the bugs yet, but we continue an awesome relationship with the Pacific Science Center. So about yearly, I participate in different kinds of interactive fairs that they have there in the Science Center with our Lopez students. So that's fun. So coming back to what are the things you really need to make or remake anything? You need materials. You need time, you need labor, you need storage, and you need knowledge. So you can upcycle anything, including human waste, right, into humanure, if you have those things. You can basically take almost anything and turn it back into a usable product with those elements. And unfortunately, the storage / space is at a premium on our islands. As is, qualified labor and then the staffing time to do it. But we have a lot of the materials. So for instance, here are some photos. I often do a lot of tours. I also do training and outreach and education for Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District, and lots of different learning groups come through. I think this is a learning group from Shaw Island who came over, and they were exploring our Take It or Leave It, and they were doing a service project. We have lots and lots of people who donate shoes to us. Not all shoes can be worn. Some shoes, not so great anymore. How could we upcycle them into something fun? Again, if you have time and labor and storage and knowledge, you can take anything and turn it into something fun again. So there they are cleaning out what I call shoe apocalypse, which happens about once a year. We get overflowing with shoes and we have to cull them out. And we culled out all the cutest ones so that we could plant them into a little succulent garden. And then I collaborated with Lopez Library. We took all the fun, cute shoes and got a bunch of plants and turned them into little planters, holes in the bottom, put gravel in the bottom of the shoes so they'd have good drainage. And there you go, succulent garden, right? Pinterest, easy peasy. So same idea, you can take anything that you have too much of and turn it back into a usable product, thus closing the loop if you've got these elements, this time, labor, storage, knowledge. Enter the remakery. So one of our colleagues, I believe from Woodby Island, came over and did a tour, and he said, I love your remakery idea. Well, that wasn't even my term yet, but I said, hey, can I use that term? He goes, totally. It's like a bakery, except a remakery, a place where you remake stuff. So what if we had a dedicated space on Lopez for a remakery that could house tools and storage and our machines, for instance, our 3D printer and our fill-extruder and our shredder, and we could have a dryer? What if we had a classroom space or workspace available so we could do classes like, for instance, the one I just showed you where we turned old shoes into fun planters, and we had exciting and compelling kinds of output products that the public would like to interact with? What if it had a staff and a volunteer coordinator, because we have an incredible retired population on many of our islands, many of which like to give back to their communities. So we have a lot of people who have some capacity of time and knowledge, incredible experience to bring to volunteering. So imagine all of the skills that we could get in one place if we had a remakery, if we actually had a dedicated space. We could host repair cafes, and Clark has been with me on repairing things in many of the repair cafes in previous years. I'm just making sure that there's nobody else here in my at-home audience that I should be naming and thanking for being part of our awesome volunteer group. But repair cafes have been great because it's a good way to take an item that would otherwise perhaps end up in the landfill, something beloved, do an easy fix, and then you have your favorite lamp or you have your favorite boombox. We've done several repair cafes on Lopez. And what we found is we need frequency. We need them to be a little more predictable so that people can know when they're going to happen and that they can hold on to their item for a fixed amount of time, not just, well, someday there'll be a repair cafe and I'll just leave it in the closet for the next 4 years. But I know that they happen at regular intervals and I can save it and I can bring them in. We also love the idea about what about encouraging entrepreneurial enterprises locally? We have all this material that we want to be reused or recycled or repurposed. It just takes somebody with, again, labor and time and a space to do it in. So wouldn't that be cool? And I'll show you some examples of some of the things that we're doing locally as well. And then this idea, we have so many people with so much expertise. I'm sure many of you are aware that the San Juan Islands hold the highest level of education anywhere in our state. So the most amount of master's degrees and PhDs per capita of anywhere. So we have such an incredibly well-educated populace of people who come here to retire, perhaps to their second home or their forever home. Wouldn't it be great to share some of those skills multi-generationally? So, you've got somebody in high school who's interested in old style woodworking, dovetail woodworking, or fill in the blank. We just have so many refined and very specific kinds of makers who move here to the San Juan Islands, many of which, by the way, have garages full of tools. Wouldn't it be great if we had a tool lending library and not everybody had to have fill in the blank tool, right? Maybe something you use once a year. Didn't have to, everybody didn't have to have one, but we had one available for the community. And how much access could that give people to close the loop on creating new products if they had the access to maker spaces that made that possible? And if somebody who frankly might be aging out and has an entire garage full of these specialty machines or tools could possibly, bequeath them or pass them on, maybe even with videos about how to use them to a tool lending library or a maker space. We could just capture so much of that skill and experience and specific machines and put them into use. So let me try to keep rolling down here. So some examples of stuff we're already doing, and this is just literally the tip of the iceberg, but these are some things that we have been doing on an ongoing basis and that have been very successful. So our LSWDD Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District has a 501c3 nonprofit who raise funds for Lopez Solid Waste, and they're called SWAP, Solid Waste Alternatives Project, and they're their own distinct NGO or 501c3, and they do fun engaging entrepreneurial enterprises and raise money so that I can do remake lab projects and all kinds of things that they help raise money for. You can see in the middle, there's Kim Norton. She's our current board chair and she's holding up a skirt. One of our former SWAP board members went to Guatemala and saw these really cute skirts that people were wearing, all made out of upcycled t-shirts. She asked for a pattern. Somebody gave her a pattern. She came back up, and with that pattern, we've taken and diverted all of these awesome t-shirts out of our textile bin, our free clothes bin, which I'd like to name that this cashmere sweater and this awesome garment that I'm wearing that's organic cotton also both came out of our awesome take it or leave it textile stream. Lots of beautiful things that can happen and come to you like the softest cashmere ever from that textile stream. So we have lots and lots of t-shirts that could get diverted. We're also currently diverting a lot of those t-shirts that might not be wearable into rags and creating rag bundles because the textile stream has been interrupted with the pandemic and we're not able to recycle textiles at the quantity that we used to, which, just to blow your mind for a moment, was about 4,000 pounds per month. We live on an island of 2,400 people, full-time resident, and we were recycling 4,000 pounds a month from Lopez Island alone in textile recycling. So if that gives you any scope of the idea of how many textiles are moving through our Take It or Leave It. Take It or Leave It used to, before pandemic time, take in 2,000 pounds of usable goods per day, per 4 hours that we were open. So we're talking about a huge amount of material for a small island and a very small populace. So a lot of these projects and these products are very viable if you have labor and you've got skill and you've got somebody who can invest in it. So t-shirt skirts are in the middle. Over on the far side, one of the longest standing upcycled projects that has been happening on the island since the birth of SWAP. And our very first SWAP board were feed bags. So these are feed bags. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Whoa, crazy. These are feed bags that the feed station here, or the feed market here on Lopez, they're bird seed, dog food, cat food, pet food. They traditionally come in a woven plastic it's like a tarp that's sort of woven into itself. It's non-recyclable. Even back in the day when we could recycle plastic bags, this kind of plastic was still non-recyclable, but very durable. And actually, Jody, the woman who runs our feed store, creates these bags. All she does is cut off the top, hems them beautifully, turns their extra parts into handles, and she puts even a nice mesh bottom in them and a little tag saying that they were handmade. And SWAP has been selling them for years, and they're so durable. So anyway, that's a great example of something that might be a waste product. Again, time and labor and expertise closes the loop, and then the proceeds go to support LSWDD. On the far left is one of the most current entrepreneurial enterprises that an awesome single mom and artist is creating. She's taking, you can see those are kombucha bottles. What you can't see in that photo is they're the very large kombucha bottles. So very, very thick glass. And you can see in the bottom slide there that they are glass candles. So her company is called Blue Snake Company, Blue Snake Candle Company, excuse me. And so she takes and she cuts the bottoms off of these very thick glass bottles and sandblasts them. So she files the edges so that they are safe and smooth. And then she fills them with wax and wicks, and voila, she's got a handmade candle that helped close the loop on glass containers. So getting to the end here, we only have one more slide. So really, if we had such a thing as the Remakery, I just did write a grant for quite a large sum of money. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll know in the next few weeks whether that grant might come through for said Remakery, which is why I'm mentioning it to you. But even if we don't get that grant, this concept and this idea of marrying maker spaces with materials that might be recycled or repurposed or reused in some way, marrying those two things together is a beautiful way on our islands to help close the loop. So here are some images of things that we've done. Up in the top right, I'd love to honor top right. Here is, this is an octopus. It's a light up octopus made out of bubble wrap and plastics. And it was a parade puppet that we paraded down Main Street, one of our lightings of the Christmas trees. There's often a white parade or a light parade that comes through. And so this octopus got animated via people. It was a giant puppet, and she continues to live. So that was a really fun way to repurpose bubble wrap. Down below, we're repurposing textiles. You can see some adorable little pumpkins who are part of that sewing process. And the woman on the far left here is holding up a stuffed animal that was all made out of repurposed fabrics that we have, again, with our textile stream. We have so many repurposed fabrics. And there in the middle was one of our collaborative classes that we did at the Lopez Library. They've got a classroom space, so we often partner with them, bring in our materials. But if we had our own dedicated classroom space, my goodness. There's a flyer for one of the repair cafes. Many of the repair cafes have also been used in that library meeting space because, as I said, space is at a premium on Lopez Island. There are just not a lot of spaces. And up here you have one of our dump volunteers, very beloved. That's Warren Hero. God rest his soul. Warren passed away in this last year, and we really miss him. He was an incredible human. And here he was doing a Christmas tree light repair cafe at our Take It or Leave It. So people were bringing in their old strands of Christmas lights, and Warren was just plugging them in and finding where they were missing and redoing them and making them usable again, and then sending them out for Christmas. So Warren was a huge part of our Take It or Leave It, and we really miss him. So in honor of him. So that is the end of my lecture, but I would imagine that you have a lot of questions. So I wanted to leave enough time for some Q&A for the last part. So there is my contact information. Thanks, Clark. Thanks for being here. And also our website, if you want to look at a lot of these projects, are listed on our website, our Remake Lab, Maker Spaces, a lot of those products that I was talking about are on the website, so you can find all that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll move back into traditional presentation, and I am open to questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question verbally, or you're welcome to use your reaction button that's down there on the far right of your menu screen and has a little raised hand icon. You're welcome to use that as well. Nice work, Clark.
Thank you so much for that very interesting talk. I just wanted to reiterate that everybody can unmute themselves when they want to ask a question.
And I can talk and talk and talk. So if nobody has questions about makerspaces, boy, do I have a lot to say. It's hard to shut me up. So I tried to get myself quiet enough. Yeah, Sandy, go ahead.
So I could only come in at the very end. So I apologize for that because I was very interested, but I had another meeting. So I'm wondering in terms of this exciting stuff that's happening and these things that are being made. So what's the market end of it? Is it people are on their own, or is there some sort of collective way to start marketing?
But in answer to your question, Sandy, what about markets? Yes, it's a great question. I am currently helping SWAP build Squarespace. SWAP is distinct from LSWDD, and the reason that that is important is because LSWDD takes in a tax levy. So every year, Lopez voters are asked to approve a tax levy, and about a quarter of our working budget comes from that tax levy. So because we receive tax dollars, we're very precise and transparent about what we do with that tax money. So SWAP, our 501c3 partner that are, quote, friends of the dump, has a lot more capacity to house and be part of helping create maker or market spaces for makers. So at current, SWAP has a new, young, hot, awesome board member, and she and I are helping create a makerspace that will link to an Etsy. And so our idea is that makers could then link to an Etsy. And this is a future vision that we hope we will actualize. It's in process, so it's not done yet. Currently, SWAP does mainly analog sales, meaning they do on-site farmers market sales all summer long on Lopez, and they sell in other different pop-up spaces, Paper Scissors on the Rock, and other places. There's this confluence between board members who have certain ways of visioning how products get sold, and then new people who come forward who say, the digital makers and market spaces are really helpful. Let's get those together. It's just a matter of and I mean this in the very most generous way, walking our friends across the digital land bridge in migration. Come on over, come on, we can Etsy it. So that's in process.
Okay.
Other questions? Did that answer all your questions, Sandy?
Well, yeah, I even have more, but I want to hear from other people too, so. So quiet.
I know. That might be you, Sandy. You might get to ask more questions.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, I was starting to launch a business called Artisan Gifts and Wands, and for family reasons, I kind of had to put it on hold. But as I was looking for artisan projects made in the archipelago, some products came to mind, and I don't personally want to make products. I want to be the promoter, the distributor of them. But so I'm wondering if one were to have an idea about a product, how would you put it out there that there was a product that you're interested in being able to offer on your website? Does anyone want to make it? So
What a great idea. And I'm sad that you missed, Yeah, I think you'll smile and nod through a lot of the recording of my presentation. If you
Good.
just watch
Sorry.
it, like, oh yeah, yes, oh yes. So one of the things that I was emphasizing about the maker movement is the collaboration, the collaborative aspect, and the sort of open source sharing. Like, hey, I can't make this thing, but somebody should. Here, let me put up plans and let's share it out. We're hoping that our new swap website will have an interactive function to it. So, you know, a way for people to chat with each other and a way to post some of those ideas. And we're hoping that that's exactly what the Remakery would be. I was lucky enough to be friends with the person who started the first tech shop in the Bay Area. And the tech shops were a membership-based maker space. And this was enormous. This was the one right in downtown San Francisco. It was 4 stories. It had everything from incredible 3D printing to metalworking to, you know, like wood blasting and CNC cutters. It had beautiful driving ability, quilts, stitchers, you know, and it was, the tech shops were quite an interesting innovation. Unfortunately, they went national and they went big and they didn't succeed that I know of. And forgive me if I say your name incorrectly. Is it Yotam? Yotam, I saw you nodding, you know, about tech shops and maker spaces. And there's lots of maker spaces that are membership modeled and that have had mixed reviews and mixed successes over time. But that's exactly what I'm hoping for a Remakery, is that it allows that collaborative project space to be held. And then there's maybe a digital bulletin board or maybe a physical bulletin board. And, you know, staff and volunteers are able to help facilitate those collaborative closed loop, you know, closing the loop partnerships. Like Sandy's got all these great ideas and she's got designs for them. Oh, you people are looking for money-making opportunities, or you students, and you're looking to do things with. Oh, and then Clark can volunteer some time and it turns out he's got just mad skills, right? Let's bring Clark in. And then once you have the space, you can get all those loops getting closed. So everyone cross your fingers that my grant comes through and we can at least have a little seed money startup for the Remakery and get it going, because we have everything we need for repair cafes. We do them. We have so many more things for a tool lending library, and Clark and I were part of that together for many years, more years than it should have been in its preliminary planning processes, modeling them after tool lending libraries in Seattle and in Berkeley, partnering with our local library. We even had a place where we envisioned like plan A, plan B, and plan C. And plan B was like a tiny house that could be on a trailer and could be like a mobile tool lending library. We had gone through all the way through lawyers and liability insurance and gotten to the place where we could form an LLC to create a tool lending library, to partner with the library and have our own distinct volunteers. And then our library's internal governance kind of fell apart, and there was a shift in their management. And unfortunately, their current staffing is not all the way behind a tool lending library. And so then that couple of years of planning that Clark and I did, sort of, it's still there in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the new spot for where it can come forward, because we literally cannot house all the tools that want to be donated to the Take It or Leave It, many of which are viable, really good tools. And if we have, again, people who know how to repair tools, people who know how to maintain them, and a budget modeled after the, you know, tool lending library budgets for repair and repurchase. And it also has, they're also very open source and collaborative, all of the tool lending libraries. Mickey, you have a question, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just realizing before everybody goes, since you got a few people who are on this call who haven't been able to make some of the previous meetings, maybe we should take a minute to go, if nobody has any questions right now, to go around and introduce each other.
Sure.
Does that sound good?
Sure.
So, actually, Sandy, why don't since you popped up on my screen, why don't we start with you, and then you can pass it to the next person.
Yeah. So I live on San Juan Island, and I actually work for the town of Friday Harbor doing historic preservation. But I'm really interested in this, and I come up with these ideas, and I think, God, this is such a great idea. And I'm one of those people who doesn't really know You know, I don't know. Well, I don't have the ability to get started now, but I'd like to see things happen. And I did with my daughter when she was, I don't know, 6th grade. We started this little business called Island Girl Recycled Crayons. And we would take crayons and melt them down on our kitchen stove and then pour them into molds and package them. And they're really sweet. And, but my daughter's lost interest in it. And, you know, I think there's a few sort of glitches that I didn't really know how to fix, you know, like, you know, more effective ways to produce these, more time efficient ways to deal with these crayons. And that my lights do this, I don't know why, but and so now I have about 200 pounds of color sorted crayons. And I don't know, that's one of the things I'd like to sell with Artisan Gifts and Wands, but it's so time consumptive. Anyway, so I'm telling you my problem, but that's, you know, I like these things, but they also have to, if you're going to try to make a business out of them, it has to be cost effective. And there's a lot of questions that I think there's smart people who know how to answer them. So I'm sort of hoping to be able to stay connected with you guys. And I don't know what's going on San Juan Island, but I'm very impressed with what I'm hearing on Lopez. Sorry about my lights. Anyway, that's me.
Clark, you're next on my screen. Do you wanna introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Clark Johnson. Nikyta was nice enough to introduce me to some extent during her presentation, so I don't need to say all that much more. I'm very interested in continuing to support smart people and this whole focus. My most recent emphasis is a batch of electronics gear that came our way, and we're getting ready to, it's very, very high-end stuff, so it's not the most basic things, but we're putting together a group and beginning the process of kind of potentiating this equipment into a setting that would allow a person to have an electronics lab at their disposal, that they could develop products. And again, as Nikyta pointed out, it's space. That's, you know, the space is just a really big problem, and funding at the beginning to get it to work. So that's what I'm working on right now. I've kind of moved on from being on the board of the dump and felt at sea, so I had to do something. Nikyta, you know me, so I'm at it.
Yeah, you'll be my electronics expert as soon as we can get a space for it.
I think I'll just let people chime in as they want to introduce themselves, so that I don't, in case anybody doesn't want to be do so on the video.
Wow, I know so many people in this room. Hi,
Hello.
Christian.
Great to see you, Liz.
Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Will. And God, Nikyta, good for you. Nikyta, I sent the email about this to Will, and Will sent out a whole thing saying, Nikyta's a rock show.
And Will, are you the one who named it the Remakery? Was it you?
No,
Was it you? Okay.
nope, we're Vashon Island, that would be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I met Nikki in April 2018. I came up, stayed over at Midnight's Farm, and came up to see, representing Zero Waste Vashon, what you were doing up on Lopez, and sort of kept pick my jaw up off the floor because what you're doing is so awesome. But so I'm super interested in what you've been solving, the problems you've been solving, and how you're doing it. I'm involved in Vashon Fix It, very active member there, and curious to see how you're coming up with solutions for all of these things to make them sort of work and together. I do have one question. Are you politically active at all? Because there's, like, for example, a right to repair bill that's up, and I'm wondering if essentially if you're actually advocating for that, because one of the problems we have in repairing stuff is they're increasingly making stuff really hard to repair, as opposed to, or making parts obsolete instantly, etc. So we're getting ready to advocate to look, people should have the right to repair.
We, I stay involved just peripherally through our association, an association that we belong to as LSWDD, which is the Washington State Recycling Association, and they do legislative work and also have lobbyists and keep us aware. Yeah, Clark, go ahead.
So it might be something the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC.
SWAC would be good.
The county has a committee that has in the past been very aware of legislative action and taken positions.
Mm-hmm. The thing I'm most excited about is a bottle deposit law and bottle deposit legislation, because that will solve so many things so quickly. I mean, Oregon has been historic and such a leader, and they're our next door neighbor. Don't get me started. Anyway, let's keep the introductions going. Who else is here? Good to see you, Will. Good to see you, Liz.
I'll go ahead. I'm a stranger, so I just want to warn everybody I have an unstable internet connection, so if I get dropped.
Like all of us.
That's why. My name is Yotam Zohar. Hi, everyone. I'm actually based in New York City right now, but my family and I are planning to move to the San Juans this summer. We were actually out there recently looking at properties, and same with the makerspace, the issue is always funding, isn't it? But I'm a middle school art teacher, and my background is as a painter and an educator, and I was working with a place here in Brooklyn that was kind of part makerspace, part art center for about 4 years, and that's actually what brought me to the city before everything else kind of took hold. And so it's something I'm really interested in. And actually, our plan is to live aboard a sailboat in Friday Harbor when we move, while we're getting all set up on land. And poking around the Port of Friday Harbor website is how I found this community. So it's really great to be here, and thank you for your presentation.
Great, it's fun to have you. Thanks for zooming in at 9:30 at night in New York over there.
Great. I'll say hi. I'm Gretchen Crump. I'm on Orcas Island. It's good to see familiar faces around the circle here. I'm a big fan of Nikyta's. I love what she does in the world and on our islands. She creates a lot of resiliency. So I wanted to tune in and see what she was going to bring to the EDC. There's people on Orcas who have wanted to get a makerspace set up at our landfill and also tool share. So always open to great ideas. Nice to be here.
So good to have you. Gretchen's one of my favorite co-conspirators and resources. Which, Gretchen, thank you for reminding me. I mentioned something in my lecture that I said I'd get back to, and I didn't get back to it, and it was power. Some awesome human beings came over from Orcas, and we were helping us hand crank some of our plastics, and the man who was doing it with his son for 3 hours so that his son could be part of the next trial of extruding enough shredded plastic to actually have a viable little strand of extruded plastic. He was like, I've got some means and some resources. I'm just going to buy a beefy shredder right now. Like, can't I just buy one on the internet? I was like, yeah, but you might want to check in with where you're going to house it and how it's going to work. And he was like, whatever. He just hit buy, got a really beefy shredder and an awesome extruder. And they were both 220. And he brought them to ORS and he was like, I have this awesome thing. Let's do a remake lab over here. And they were like, that's awesome. We can't plug it in. And it sat for like a year because it was so challenging to get an electrician to come and to redo the power and the permitting and la, 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 la. So anyway, my engineers were very smart when they said, check your power availability. So for instance, in our remakery, if we're in additional office space, we're not going to have 220 available. You know, we're going to have to like, anyway. So that's my Orcas story, is that Orcas has also been trying to do the same thing. We're a big fan of empowering our friends on other islands to go big and try other innovations. Yeah, they had the same problems that we've had.
I saw that Orcus has part of their infrastructure grant. They're going to grind up glass, which
Which will be great. We used to have a grinder here. It was wonderful. A lot of paths have been created out of that tumbled glass. So it'll be nice to have that again.
Mm-hmm.
What do you use with it? What do you make with it?
They just tumble it. But one of our artists here at a pottery used to line all of her paths rather than mulch. She used the tumbled glass. Really pretty.
Yeah, I bet.
I think and if you'd like to introduce
great too.
yourself.
I used to work for a company that made, oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Why don't you go ahead and finish, Yotam, and then we'll see if
quickly-
Christina wants to introduce herself. And I got a message from Kate.
Sure, I worked for a small design company that made hand-blown glass lighting. And what I learned working there was that you can't just take any broken glass bottles and turn them into blown glass products. So it's nice to see those kind of cold work solutions happening.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Tina Fisher, and I live in Friday Harbor, and I'm part of the transitions group here, and specifically interested in different sorts of things that people are doing with waste. And I've been over to your dump and seen it, and it's a wonderful thing, and it'd be great to have something like that happening here. So just participating to get a little bit more information, learn a little bit more, and yeah, go from there. See what we're going to be able to do on this island.
And hopefully you can be part of, there's a collaborative Zoom call that's happening next week on the 21st between Transitions San Island, Transitions Lopez Island, and the Plastics Free Salish Sea Coalition. That'd be great.
Yeah, that
Lots of ways to get involved.
Thank you.
Sure. Any final questions before we send you off to your dinners or bedtimes or painting time if you're in New York City or Brooklyn?
I have a solid waste question. You said you bale as much as possible. I saw some of you self-bailing. What do you do about styrofoam?
We don't take it. Unfortunately, it doesn't come in with enough mass for it to be viable to get to King County, which is the only place that I know that they recycle styrofoam or polypropylene.
Yeah, we have a massive project, first Sunday of that month, and we do take it over to Kent
Right.
to start recycle. But it is, the volume is astounding.
Yeah. And the density, it's so big and it's so light.
Yeah, it's 98% air.
Exactly. And that's the issue for us, as you know, being another island.
Because one of the big issues is there's so much marine styrofoam around, and there's so much showing up on our beaches, et cetera, as this breaks down from floats, et cetera, that we are trying to be more aggressive about dealing with the problem.
You know, Nikita, David Zaplak had a device that he was looking at. Do you know any more about that? It was it was somehow it used some kind of lemony acid type stuff and would take all the air out, and you ended up with this. Do you remember that? Anyway.
I remember, yeah, but I don't know if it was viable for us, but yeah, be interesting to look into.
So Will, you
Zero
might
waste
contact
fashion.
David Zaplak. Nikita can certainly give you or just send an email to the dump.
I'll put his email in the chat window.
So David was interested in, I don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, we are taking 14-foot box vans sometimes in order to get rid of just once a month. It takes 4 or so trips to get that all. The volume is just astounding.
Exactly. And that's why, recycling is not a really viable option, because it's already cost negative when it comes to transport and fuel costs and staffing and overhead. But when it gets really long distances in your truck, like our truck gets 4 miles to the gallon, you get not just cost negative, but cost prohibitive.
Right.
So unless you have like awesome zero Vashon volunteers who are willing to do 3 loads in a truck to Kent with your styrofoam,
Yeah, that's what we're
some
doing.
of those
Actually,
things,
what we've
like,
done
wouldn't
is
it
we've
be
teamed
interesting?
up with the food bank, which picks up their food in exactly the same location. So we go with a full truck of styrofoam and we come back with food.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, backhauling. Backhauling is what is the only way recycling has ever been viable. That's how we do our textile recycling, is backhauling with a man who does the freight, ships the freight off. By the way, before we leave completely, Yotam, I just wanted to say I do a ton of arts education in the schools and in the community as well, with all kinds of different projects and processes. And if I had my way and my biggest vision in the whole world, we would have something like San Francisco's Recology Artist in Residency program. I don't know if you know about them. They also have a Seattle branch, which is where they jury beautiful mid-career artists. They provide them with stipends and studio space, and then they get to scavenge anything out of the landfill, make beautiful art shows that also educate people about zero waste, show their work. And so I would love to do that up here someday. That's always been
Great. Well,
a big dream.
I hope to remain in touch with you about that.
Please.
You know, bring, you know, more art to all the art that's already there somehow. I just really want to say about the recyclable styrofoam. I had an idea while you were talking about it, which is you had the kind of events for artists to make products out of the recycled materials and then put them on Etsy. And I was thinking, well, if they're selling them on Etsy, they need to ship them. So if there's all this extra styrofoam, maybe they can somehow at least repurpose it for packing material or something. It's kind of a problem because that doesn't make it go away. It just probably gets it into somebody else's trash can, but at least it extends the life of its use. I don't know, just a thought.
That's brilliant. One of the artists in residence at Recology took styrofoam and made a perfect Hummer, full-size Hummer. And it's gorgeous. I've seen it in like San Francisco airport exhibit. It's so beautiful. But that is brilliant. We do have bubble wrap in a place for reuse in our recycle plaza for exactly that, so that people can do shipping and they can just reuse it one more time. But that would be a great hack for shipping for Etsy. I will totally be telling the woman who's going to run the Etsy shop about that idea, because that would be great.
Okay, I got to check out. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Clark,
Thanks,
see you
Nikyta.
later.
Incredible presentation.
Nikyta, thank you
Good
so
job.
much. Mickey, thanks for hosting us.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Everybody.
Nikki, you're a rock star.
Thank you so much. It's probably a good time for all of us to sign off. Mickey, I'll stay on a little longer if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. And I look forward to collaborating with you in the future, or continuing to collaborate with you.